The rain poured heavily that night, drenching the quiet countryside in a restless storm. The narrow dirt road leading to Evelyn's small cottage was flooded, and the winds howled through the trees like mournful voices of the past. Evelyn pulled her thin shawl closer around her shoulders as she hurried through the dark path, her basket of herbs clutched tightly in her hands. She was used to such nights. Growing up in the countryside meant being at the mercy of nature. Storms, floods, and harsh winters had always been part of her life. Yet, this night felt different. Something in the air made her heart race faster, a strange urgency urging her steps forward. As she neared the abandoned barn on the edge of the village, she heard it, a faint, almost broken sound. It wasn't the cry of an animal, nor the creak of wood in the storm. It was human. Startled, Evelyn paused, straining her ears. Again, the sound came, low, painful, a groan that carried suffering. Her instincts tugged at her. Without a second thought, she pushed open the old wooden door of the barn. The sight before her froze her breath. There, lying in the hay, was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, his white shirt soaked with rain and sweat, his lips pale as though life itself was slipping from him. His hand clutched at his chest, his breaths ragged and shallow. For a moment, Evelyn's mind refused to believe what her eyes saw. This wasn't an ordinary traveler. The fine cut of his shirt, the luxury wristwatch on his arm, the aura of power even in his weakness, all of it screamed wealth and status. But what struck her most were his eyes when they fluttered open and locked onto hers. Dark, intense, filled with pain yet laced with a fire that refused to die. Evelyn gasped, rushing to his side. "Sir, are you all right? Please, stay with me." His voice was hoarse, almost a whisper. "I need warmth." She had heard of such things, city rumors about Alexander Reed, the young CEO whose empire stretched across industries. A man called the Abstinent King, for he was said to never touch women, never indulge in vices, always cold, distant, untouchable. But here he was, broken, fragile, human. Evelyn's hands trembled as she touched his forehead. He was burning with fever, his entire body trembling violently. Panic surged through her veins. She was just a simple country girl. What could she possibly do for a man like him? Yet, deep inside, she knew she couldn't just leave him there. The storm outside roared louder, lightning flashing across the sky, illuminating the barn in quick bursts. Evelyn bit her lip, torn between fear and compassion. Then she remembered her grandmother's words, "Sometimes, life tests us with choices. The heart always knows the right one." Gathering courage, Evelyn sat beside him, holding his icy hands between hers. "Don't give up. I won't let you die here." But Alexander's condition worsened. His chest rose and fell with difficulty, his skin clammy and pale. In that desperate moment, Evelyn made a choice that would change her life forever. She lay beside him, letting her warmth shield his trembling body. Her innocent sacrifice was not born of desire, but of compassion, of a desperate need to save a stranger's life. As minutes turned to hours, his breathing steadied. The violent trembling began to ease. Slowly, his eyes opened again, and this time, they stayed on her face, studying her with an intensity that made her heart pound. "Why," he whispered, his voice rough but steadying, "why would you do this for me?" Evelyn swallowed, her cheeks flushed. "Because you needed someone. And I couldn't turn away." Something flickered in his gaze, a crack in the armor he had built for years. Alexander Reed, the man the world called cold and untouchable, had found warmth in the arms of a girl who had nothing but kindness to give. When the first light of dawn crept through the cracks of the barn, Alexander was no longer trembling. He sat up slowly, his composure returning, though his eyes never left Evelyn. She, on the other hand, was blushing furiously, clutching her shawl around her shoulders, unsure how to face him now. He stood tall, even in his disheveled state, his presence commanding. Then, in a tone that carried both gratitude and authority, he spoke words that left Evelyn speechless. "You saved me, Evelyn. Not just my body, but something far deeper. From this day forward, you belong to me. I will never let you go." Her eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. Belong to him? What did he mean? She was just a poor girl from the countryside. Surely a man like him was used to models, heiresses, women of status and beauty. But the way he looked at her, fierce, protective, unyielding, made her heart tremble. It wasn't the gaze of a man giving her charity. It was the gaze of a man who had found something he never thought he needed. Evelyn lowered her eyes, unsure, confused, yet deeply moved. She didn't understand why fate had thrown her into this moment, but a quiet voice inside whispered that her life would never be the same again. As Alexander extended his hand to her, the storm outside finally quieted, as though the heavens themselves acknowledged the birth of a new bond, fragile, unexpected, yet destined to change both their worlds forever. Evelyn never expected her life to change so drastically after that stormy night in the barn. She had saved a stranger, only to discover that stranger was Alexander Reed, the most powerful and mysterious CEO in the city. She thought he would forget her, return to his glittering empire, and leave her to her humble country life. But Alexander was not a man who forgot. For days, Evelyn tried to convince herself it was a fleeting moment, a dream she could bury in her memory. She returned to her small routines, collecting herbs, helping her aunt in the village cafe, and pretending her heart wasn't racing every time she recalled his fierce promise, "You belong to me. I will never let you go." Yet, deep inside, she felt it. Something had shifted. She had crossed paths with a man who carried storms in his veins, and now she couldn't escape his orbit. One quiet afternoon, the cafe buzzed with its usual chatter. Villagers and passing travelers filled the wooden tables, sipping tea and laughing over small-town gossip. Evelyn wiped down a table, her apron tied neatly around her waist, her simple dress dusted with flour from the morning's baking. She felt safe here, hidden in the ordinary. Then, the cafe doors opened, and silence fell like a heavy curtain. A sleek, black limousine had pulled up outside, its polished surface reflecting the countryside like a mirror. The driver opened the door, and out stepped Alexander Reed. He was not the broken man Evelyn had nursed that stormy night. He stood tall in a perfectly tailored black suit, his aura sharp and commanding. The air seemed to bend around him, his presence so powerful that even the loudest gossipers fell silent. His dark eyes scanned the room until they found her, his Evelyn. Her heart stopped. The tray in her hands trembled. She had hoped never to see him again, yet a secret part of her had longed for this moment. Alexander walked straight through the rows of stunned villagers, his polished shoes clicking against the wooden floor. Without hesitation, he stopped in front of her. His voice, deep and certain, broke the silence. "Evelyn," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I came to take you with me." Gasps erupted across the cafe. Women clutched their shawls. Men whispered his name in awe. Evelyn's cheeks burned as dozens of eyes fell on her. She shook her head, stammering, "Mr. Reed, you shouldn't, this isn't." But Alexander wasn't finished. He reached into his pocket, and when his hand emerged, it held a velvet box. In one swift, deliberate motion, the most feared CEO in the city dropped to one knee on the cafe floor. The room erupted into chaos, shrieks, gasps, the clatter of dishes falling to the ground. Never in their lives had these villagers imagined such a sight. Alexander Reed, the cold abstinent billionaire, kneeling before a simple country girl. "Evelyn," his voice was softer now, but it carried the weight of steel, "you gave me life when I was closest to death. I swore that day never to let you go. Be my wife. Be the woman who stands by me, not in the shadows, but as my equal. You are the only one who has ever touched my soul." The diamond in the box sparkled under the dim lights of the cafe, but it wasn't the jewel that made Evelyn's knees weak, it was his eyes. Eyes that held sincerity, devotion, and a promise of protection she had never known. Tears welled in her eyes. She whispered, trembling, "I'm just a waitress. A country girl. I can't belong in your world." Alexander reached for her hand, his grip warm, steady. "You belong with me. Nothing else matters." The cafe had gone utterly still, everyone holding their breath, waiting. Evelyn's heart pounded so loudly she thought the whole world could hear it. Her mind screamed of the differences between him, his wealth, his power, his world of glass towers and city lights. But her heart remembered that night in the barn, when he had looked at her as if she was his only salvation. Slowly, she nodded, her lips parting in a shaky whisper. Yes. The cafe exploded into cheers and gasps. Some clapped, some wept, some recorded the scene on their old phones, eager to spread the unbelievable news. Evelyn's co-workers stood frozen in shock, while Alexander slid the ring onto her trembling finger, sealing a bond that defied every expectation. The news traveled faster than wildfire. By the next morning, every major newspaper, every online headline screamed the same story. Cold abstinent CEO marries a country girl waitress, dotes on her like a princess. Reporters camped outside Evelyn's village, their cameras flashing. Social media was ablaze with debates, some mocked, some envied, some admired. How could a man who had rejected the advances of heiresses and models choose a simple girl from the countryside? But Alexander never flinched. He held Evelyn's hand tightly in public, shielding her from the blinding lights and relentless questions. When journalists shouted, "Why her?" his answer was simple, delivered with that same iron certainty. "Because she is the only one who saved me. She is the only one I will ever love." Evelyn's world spun with disbelief. She was whisked into a life of glittering parties, high-rise apartments, and silk gowns she never imagined wearing. Yet, through it all, Alexander's hand never left hers. He walked beside her, never ahead, never behind, as if she truly was his princess. At night, when the world was quiet, Evelyn would stare at the ring on her finger, still wondering if this was all a dream. But then Alexander's deep voice would brush against her ear, grounding her in reality. "You don't have to be afraid," he would whisper. "From now on, every storm, every battle, I will fight them for you. You saved me once, Evelyn. Now it's my turn to protect you." And as she lay in his arms, her heart whispered back what her lips couldn't yet say aloud: "This man is mine, and somehow, impossibly, I am his." The city had been shaken by the proposal, but for Evelyn, it was only the first step into a life of trials, devotion, and love that would test every boundary between their worlds.